Hello, everyone. My name is Lucian. Most of you know me from Twitter as Triangle Investor. I'm delighted to host Uranium veteran and legend in my show today. That is Mr. John Borshoff, DYLLF Limited CEO. John, welcome to my show. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here, Lucian, and I'm looking forward to the next 50 or so minutes, or however it will take to complete the interview.
Looking forward. Although majority of my viewers know who are you, I would like to ask you nevertheless that you give us a 2-minute overview of who is John Borshoff, how did you get involved in uranium, and your role as DYLLF CEO.
That's a big question to answer in 2 minutes, but basically,
okay, four minutes.
I started my uranium career back in well, when was it? 1972, and that was just after the oil shock boom. The nickel boom had just finished, and I then started looking after my military service for a job, and got into uranium, which was very strange for me at the beginning, and I still remember how strange it was. And that's why I sometimes think when people come and join the uranium family from no background, it's a strange one, and it has a completely different measuring phenomena, issues, aspects. But anyway, I then joined a West German group called Uranitz Bergbau, and that gave me one hell of a good solid background for over sort of 18 years, and I had a senior executive role on the Australasian Centre. When they pulled out of Australia because of geopolitical reasons, I founded Paladin, and took the databases from Uranitz, which I felt had huge value, and started the progress of Paladin, which was, 1994, and it wasn't until 2003-04 that the investment of a vision started to pay huge dividends, which then became Paladin. Was the only junior that developed 2 uranium mines, 3 expansions, and was as you know, a shareholder's phenomenon.
Yes.
Fukushima then destroyed that. Up till then, we were the vision was we had 2 mines, one in Namibia and one in Malawi, and then Fukushima sort of came in. The board and me read the signs wrongly. We thought that after Chernobyl it would be much more resilient, but it wasn't, and we were carrying more debt on our projects, and prices started to fall. I left in 2015 amicably. It needed new type of people to reconstruct Paladin, and I was going to go into just normal, a few boards, and then I really sort of, I guess, saw my second vision in terms of opportunity. And whereas Paladin was on a demand dynamic, as I've often said before, I started looking at the supply dynamic, which I saw completely dysfunctional, completely destroyed through nobody's fault by Chernobyl and Fukushima. And what was the question is, who is going to be the builders of new mines? How does it accommodate a new regime? And therefore found Paladin, DYLLF. It took me a while to find the company. It took me a little longer to get funding, and then Rick Rule sort of came to support me again, and from $4 million with a strategy that I applied, which was building up internal projects plus sector consolidation, which we achieved over a 6-year period, and I believe that vision has been completed, we're now a solid company with a real future of where I think suppliers need to go. The double strategy or dual growth strategy became even more relevant that 2-3 years ago, zero emission, the geopolitical with our diversification, and we're just tailor-made for the future. And that's where we stand now. And there's a lot more exciting things up ahead. But that's me. Yes.
Great story. You mentioned Rick Rule. I had him recently on my show, and he brought up your age as a CEO of Deep Yellow. And my question is regarding that: is your retirement on the table?
Well, my retirement is when I become irrelevant and start thinking like an old man. And I have visions or what I need to do, that I'm thinking out to 2050, 2060, and trying to lay the groundwork for that. So in that sort of strategic part, yes, I can't go on forever, but I've got 2-3 years. I've got a young team around me, but in terms of trying to predict what the new future for supply companies have to be and what needs to be done, I still believe I have a lot to offer. People have to see what I'm doing, not just through my eyes and saying, oh, there's a risk there. There's a whole lot of people in the group. I have developed a team unlike any other for the stage we're at, and always understanding that a team is what makes the group unique, not necessarily just an ore body and or a deposit. So I believe, and the board has been developed in parallel. I have a chairman who's been involved in uranium, who I know, and I think that combination, if people are worried about me, he's got operational experience on Ranger and Rossing. So we make a formidable group, and I think that I could still add value. And I'm not sticking here like glue, you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm actually, because I think I can genuinely contribute, genuinely sort of mentor and guide, and I think the past 3-4 years have shown that value, I believe.
Definitely, John, definitely. Like you said, you were at the helm of Paladin during the previous uranium bull market, and we all know that that was one hell of a ride with 10,000% gains for some investors. I will not ask you about details about it, but I will ask you to compare that period with the current one. Are we going to see a violent move in uranium stocks in the next year or two? And what catalyst would be the crucial one to do this heavy lifting?
Right. So we've got to look at it in terms of a little bit of history and what's currently happening. And in that context, I'd just say that when I first became involved in uranium and the whole nuclear sort of event happened post the oil shock period, there was 30 countries involved. It was essentially a top-down decision that was made that created this, and then after Chernobyl, the whole sort of exploration side died down, whereas the back end building reactors still continued very actively because of the contracts that were there and had to be, from the 100 and odd 200 reactors that were at Chernobyl time. I think it might be a bit less, to end up at 400 at the end of the century. So then came the next episode, which was China, and China was one economy, one top-down decision. And while that was going on, no other country sold nuclear. It was just itself. And the amount of energy that sort of sort of policy decision of China made was quite phenomenal. Paladin was prepared, and I think there were many others. I mean, there was about 4 or 5 other companies that attempted to go into production but failed. But Paladin was there, and it was with Kazatomprom on a much higher level. But it was only those 2 companies that came in with significant sort of production relative to those to ourselves, and we came up with maximum 8 million pounds from zero, and of course, as you know, Kazatomprom from about 5 million to 7 million pounds up to the 40 to the 50, and as a global, whereas Kazatomprom itself has only got, as you say, attributable about 20-25 million pounds. Now comes and to say, you know, what is the difference, or where are the similarities? Yeah. Now have a completely different background on which to value what's going to happen, either with uranium price, supply, and growth. Now we've got about 15 countries that have declared that they will go nuclear. That from a position 3 years ago, where they're kicking and squealing, oh no, nuclear here and nuclear there, and then all of a sudden the zero emission reality is facing everybody, and the cheap heroin gas from Russia that people were addicted to, which I get a bit of a smile on my face about this, and it's caught everybody in a vice. And what is happening parallel with that is people are realizing the limitation, although beneficial, the limitation of renewables as an end of sort of process, a substitute for zero emission, which is bullshit, by the way. Don't even ever believe this. And so now you say, okay, where China is saying they will have 400 gigawatt of nuclear power by 2060, and from the 5% nuclear contribution to 18.2% in 2060. Whereas the Americans saying, oh, you know, we will need, and that's a 7 times increase. We will need a 3 times increase to maintain order in the US and SMRs and all of this sort of, but these are on paper. And if you really don't, you say, I don't believe what the Americans say. Well, believe what the Chinese say. And they have said everything they've said, they've done on this issue. It brings another dimension into supply-demand dynamic, but that will come into that. So now it is that nuclear is absolutely going ahead. I think the relationship and the complementary nature of the big reactors, of SMRs, and the micro reactors, which not many people talk about, that will start influencing the corporate world and get rid of these bloody ridiculous 40%, 20% contribution to zero solar and panels, and still burning bloody hundreds of millions of litres of fuel, you know, in the other side. So on that side, I don't see any chance of the uranium price staying anywhere near the levels they are now. I'm saying on a sustained basis, not this sort of episodic up and down, but with that long-term growth, with the belief of most of the world of the global warming. True or false, people believe it, and that has to be accommodated. And the madness of the over expenditure in renewables and the cost anomalies that are against renewables that aren't counted in, is that I think we've got a great future. And in that context, you've got to think, how does a post-Fukushima uranium company need to develop to be of significance to that future, and not just single mine, small bits and pieces here, but to really have long life and assurance that those teams can deliver on promise in terms of contracts.
Yeah, great one, John. You spent majority of your business life working in Africa, and I believe there is no better guest to answer my next question with the current hot topic and right now, and that is a situation in Niger. What's your comment on the situation, and how do you think that this situation will unfold?
Well, in a complicated manner, I think, with the, you know, every time. I mean, we had a little, DYLLF and those involved on the Namibian front had a bit of a scare where there was this noise coming from a workshop and a minister saying, "Look, I think we need to have a equity participation in mines." It had a devastating or a temporary devastating effect on the share market. Namibia is a fully democratized country. It immediately reacted because it is living on foreign investment, and that foreign investment is not just uranium, it's gold, it's critical metals, it's oil and gas, and diamonds. So we know what the effect is, and we know that as soon as if it's a bump in African politics, it's a huge hole in the rest of the world in terms of the imagination of what Africa is like. Now, in Niger, it is more complicated. The Francophile type relationship, and I think they do that in their own way, but there is an order in terms of how opportunities are expressed through these mining contracts. 10% equity, they can buy up to this equity, and all of these sort of things. I think you got to mix up, you got to define in two areas how it's going to affect those companies. I think companies like the French, who are a government in themselves, I think the effect on them will be pretty minimal. Whether it's the Wagner Group or the Al Qaeda remnants or whoever they are, and the US and all of that. I think that in that way, it's a hard thing to say, but my feeling would be is that there would be not much jeopardy in the progress of uranium coming out. For the littler companies, I feel some more sympathy for, because they do react on confidence, whereas the French react on funding for strategic purposes. That's a completely different package.
Yeah.
And I think there'll still be some resolution there, but I mean, there's so many unknown factors now, with who is what and where and how these things resolve. And if there's a Wagner Group in down south, down in Africa, and the complications of geopolitical in Russia and Ukraine, all of those, is there some sort of complication? But look, I think that uranium runs its own life, and I always remember this story when I was in Vietnam. Michelin owned a rubber plantation, huge one, and at that time rubber was still rubber. There was no synthetics, and there was a whole battles and wars and things going along, and in all that bloody confusion, Michelin plantation still delivered its rubber and all of that. Yeah, maybe paid this bit here and a bit there, but strange things happen in these types of environments, and strategic products still sort of somehow get through, but complicated. Who knows how it'll come out? Over.
Yeah, but as Niger counts for 5% of world mining output of uranium, if the crisis continues, would you qualify that as a distribution event, like flooding multiple Cigar Lake mines?
Look, yeah, I think it all contributes. It's exactly the amount of it's not the catalyst, I don't think, as spot wasn't the catalyst for uranium price, but it was part of a tightening, more clarifying situation for an opaque business.
Yeah.
And so what people thought that spot would do, or the Sprott sort of organization, it didn't do what was supposed to do, but helped certainly to bring the a bit more clarity to now what the main catalyst will be. So in that sense, the complacency that supply is guaranteed is always now to be taken with a grain of salt, because geopolitical reasonings come in. It doesn't mean things sort of are impossible, but a little bit more difficult. And I think the back end industry needs assurance that supply will happen, and that even in these environments, but it will have a triggering or underlying effect. I believe that when prices start to move, that will reflect as well, all of those events in the overall supply-demand equation of it.
Okay. Let's touch on long-term prices. According to your information, at what price levels are these new long-term contracts signed? I mean, are we seeing an increase in signed prices with every new contract or not?
Well, and it can only go on sort of not quite anecdotal, but certainly on trends. So if you see 2 years ago, and let's take only collared term contracts, and then collared term contracts sat with maybe a floor of 40 or whatever, 35, 40, and a ceiling probably in the sort of 45, 50. Well, over the 2-year period, those collared prices have moved from a floor of 45, 50, say, to maybe 85 as a ceiling. So that trend is really a real trend. And it doesn't reflect on the ridiculous, what everybody looks at, and I say ridiculous, spot price and the term price as is announced by those people that put it out. It's so bloody useless as a number. And everybody looks at them as if it's an LME type number, which is absolutely not true. It is just, you've got the term collared prices going up. You've got these prices which just mucking around with a little bit of spot price announcements, and that now that spot volumes are down, of course the ETFs aren't testing that market because the price will go up, because they want sort of low price. So it puts spot out of the market because they want to deal in millions of pounds, if they raise billions of dollars. And the small ones, maybe they can sort of build up a little warehouse with 50,000 pounds and all of those issues. So I think that there is definitely a move up. I think I've always said that, for a sustainable business, nothing to do with the quality of Tumas or any projects we have, that on our whole analysis, and even through Paladin, we were probably the only group junior that was doing supply demand analysis over 5-6 years. And that's, $65 even then was a number that really things had to be sustainable, to have sort of profit, to have enough there to recover your reserves, and not to be just a bloody subsidized provider of fuel to the utilities. And so that $65 that I was saying 5 years ago, even my scoping studies, without the project having been identified, and even in the West Australian project we have, I'm not even going to get out of bed below $65. Not even, it's just, and let the little young guys be giving these contracts out. And I have no rush to be, you know, oh, well, I started my project off. I absolutely, there's enough demand out there to really reward your shareholders and prepare and make it a company. So they're the sort of reasons that I have in terms of, you know, how to gauge where we're going. Individuals want to do things on their pace. That's fine. And but until the utilities realise there is a problem, and the problem they can already see in the enriched area and in the conversion area, where, you know, in conversion it's gone up whatever 700%, and enrichment for other reasons, but it's also showing that at that end things are tight, and people are not going to bloody well invest in extra capacity until there's a realization that people have got to start paying money. And of course, the tsunami of price increase is going to come back into uranium, because that in that time frame, uranium has only increased 60%. You don't even get out of bed for that. You know what I mean? And that realization has to sort of come through. And you only have to take it on the, and I don't want to overemphasize this, but it's still a supply-demand issue, where on lithium, for instance, and where everybody was saying, oh, when it was $500, $800 for spodumene and $10,000 or whatever it was for the more refined products, and the battery make, oh no, if it moves to 1,500, I'm not bloody making one more battery. Well, it gets up to a maximum of 7,500 or whatever it was, and the other refined product, yes, they're easing back, but in the end, it's demand that makes people pay the price, and the adjustments become the necessary, become the reality. Now, I'm not saying that uranium will increase by 10 times, but for me, $100 plus or minus $25 is absolutely in the mark. I mean, I don't think there can be a supply industry without that sort of support and what needs to happen. And when I think you asked a question earlier on how the industry is going to develop. We had at Fukushima 400 uranium companies, which reduced over the 8 years to 52. I think now it's back to about 95, 100. I'm not sure. And it's part of that.
120, John.
100. Thank you. So, and I say that for the uranium that needs to be found and needs to be mined in 2035 to 2050, we have to have people bloody spending and having the enthusiasm and the high uranium price to invest and discover in things that will be needed at that time. You might say, oh yeah, there's uranium here, uranium there, but it needs new stuff. So I'm saying there will be 250 uranium companies out there. They'll be exploring, they'll be following stupid ideas, we think, and from those stupid ideas comes a discovery, you know? God almighty, you know, this is what happened. Yeah. So I do see a highly energized industry. I do see a huge need for an exploration boom and to really get product out there, and so that the industry can be clearly seen to be supported by supply, and of which I think there's no doubt. But it needs investment, and it needs time. So you have investment necessary of building new mines now, and as well as prices go up, you'll see more and more of these young junior companies with ideas will start to be supported in the share market.
Okay, John, let's discuss your projects. We will start with your Tumas and Omahola project in Namibia. Please inform us what is the current status of those projects and what are the next steps for development?
So, as you know, we completed the our definitive feasibility study in February on Tumas.
Yeah.
And that opened the door for the board to consider approving the next stage. The next stage is in terms of the detailed engineering and project financing. And on the undertaking, as has always been declared by me, that the decision to proceed is based on a minimum of $65 a pound. So that's the overrider.
Yeah.
So within that, my prediction has and was even years ago was that those milestone uranium prices would be reached late this year, calendar year 23, or calendar year 24 early. I have no reason to disbelieve that, but we're quite relaxed. If it is even up to sort of mid 2024, we've got no issue. We'll get the price is now, within $8, $6 of our target, and understanding that once it reaches this point, it doesn't mean immediately there'll be a sort of offtake agreements. Yeah. The price has to consolidate. The transactional base of those prices has to be realized, and it might go to $70 or whatever it might be. But that's the sort of milestone. So we're looking at project financing, and our project financing is to find to get interest, real resource banks with banking principles, and to get a syndicate there and some sort of export agencies to support to fill, and the way we're going is a much more difficult process, only in the sense that the due diligence is much more meticulous. The sort of loan ratios and the competency of the group are really sort of interrogated, which I love. I think we can stand that group. But what we end up providing our customer and our shareholders is essentially, through that bank involvement, is a cleansed company. Cleansed in the sense it's gone through the rigors. The real financing has been organised, not through just private equity, who maybe a little bit more lenient in terms of how they decide on that, and we know we can get export agency support that way. Now that process has been now sort of engaging with various parties, seeing the level of interest, and we've been encouraged that there are parties interested, and possibly enough to start organising that package of people, and as prices go closer, then to go into the more serious analysis of and where the banks have got to believe to say, well, yeah, we do believe that prices will go above 65, and we can now devote. The credit committee can devote some assets to be able to evaluate the Tumas project, and that process is going. We are also have got the really thorough environmental impact statement, 1,000-page documents that we've been developing for 2.5 years, which was submitted to the Environmental Department Ministry in Namibia. And that has been evaluated to give us our exploration certificates, which then are presented to the Mines Department to approve the mining lease. And we've got a provisional sort of grant on that, subject to the receipt of the certificate. And this is a very professional document. The Namibia has high regard for its environment, and there's no doubt about that. So it's not as if we're looking for an easy way out, and we've treated our approach there as we would treat it in Australia.
Yeah, yeah.
So the next, if we get a a decision to develop by sort of mid 2024. That's within our framework to have a production output in calendar year 26. So those schedules are still in process. And so that's the stage of that. Omahola is looking at the sort of Rossing Husab basement type. And just to describe a little bit, the Tumas project is very much like the Langer Heinrich mine operation that we developed. It's in an old river system, sort of mineralization 0 to about 40 meters, and it's in river sediments, and the uranium is collected within the voids and the spaces of those rocks by later precipitation. So it's similar. We've improved very much the extraction process of what we had in Langer, because Langer Heinrich, although it was a innovative, we deployed technologies there that hadn't been done in the sort of the front end, alkaline leach in conventional and also membrane technologies. We've now made our Tumas a Langer Heinrich on steroids, a high performance process by improving on what we've learned. And essentially we've used Langer Heinrich as our pilot, and from that pilot we've just improved, and there'll be some great results. So even though the grade is a little bit lower, what we actually put into leach and what we extract from that leach are better than our neighbor, and that's what really counts.
Okay, same question for Mulga Rock, your project. What is the current status, and what will you do there next?
Yes. So the current the project we acquired from Vimy was one where it had an old feasibility study completed in 2018. The refresh of 2020 was incorrect, and we didn't have any notice of that sort of promotion document, and on that they had said that they had a 3 million pound per annum production capability, 2 stages of development, and a 15-year life of mine. The grade was higher, but the strip ratio was 10 times what it was in at Tumas. So a lot of your grade, if you like, is wasted against the pre-strip, and in the end the numbers are sort of equal. Yeah. But what we did find out is that there was a lot of other metals that hadn't been considered, the type of mining approach that hadn't been considered, and by adopting a more non-selective mining and within the approved footprint that is approved for mining, that we could then look at not only getting out more uranium, but also having support commodities that would introduce extra revenue, critical minerals, and also the rare earths. And you've got to look at this in context, that when Vimy started in 2012, 2010, these other metals had no value. You know, there was no critical metals, there was no battery business, and the feasibility study went on its uranium. And because they had a stop, start, miss, down on their luck, up, back, bringing the team in, what happened is it followed its nose on that initial thinking of concept that was in the early part of the development, and completely missed the sort of growing opportunity. So we saw a big upside there, both for uranium, more uranium, and more sort of revenue. And what we've done is now doing a lot of drilling we finished a lot of test work, which we're midway through, to see how we can viably extract the critical minerals, or better than what Vimy had determined, and the rare earths. It'll still be a dominant uranium project. We expect the mine life to increase to 20+ years, and give us longer life, bigger rewards, and once these test works finished, we hope to start the revised DFS in the sort of mid part of calendar year 24. Very progressive. We've also got a whole lot of teams to account for the regulatory nature of Australian mining, and specialists that can talk and give confidence to the bureaucrats. And so we're really in a full holistic approach, not just technical, but also the non-technical, which is as important in our business as technical. So it's a great project, which we think will really add to our value, and also the essential diversity of supply, which is becoming ever more important.
Okay. Can you give us an update on your Alligator project?
Yes, so the Alligator is something, again, that Vimy did extremely well, although probably couldn't afford the project at the status that was in acquiring the Alligator, a big land holding. And by the way, the other big achievement of Vimy was getting the approval, extension to the mining approval. This was a big asset, because without that, nothing would have happened. And in fact, if it wasn't for that, and us looking at the upside from our due diligence on Vimy, we wouldn't have gone in for the merger. But one of the other aspects of the merger was the Alligator projects, where my colleagues, myself, I've worked up there in the early years. It is really the sort of elephant country of uranium, as is the Athabasca. And when you look at, the amount of, the sort of 500 million pounds that has been discovered in Ranger, in Jabiluka, in Coronation Hill, in Kungara. Yes, these are frozen assets, but there's a huge amount of uranium. So you're looking at a potential target there in those areas of, it's got to be 150 million pounds minimum. Now, up till we came involved, Vimy, because it was also always cash strapped, it just focused on the one deposit that Cameco discovered and worked around that. It needed a drill hole, it needed to get some good results, because that was the justification to then raise some more money. The real value of this project, which we are now opening up, is to look at the full tenements and look at what are the prospective corridors based on geological model parameters that we use to sort of restrict and say, look, our primary prospective areas are now 30%, 20% of the whole land holding. And then going forward, we will then concentrate exploration in a two-part. One part working the nursery to identify new targets, and the other part drilling on focused mineralization and extensions, and it could be a bit of angulari, but we really need to get away and look at, as I've said to people before, if you're looking for big fish, you need big hooks. And that's the approach, and looking at a discovery there within a sort of 3 to 4 to 5 year framework, which suits our sort of progression. And I'm very excited about that project as well.
Excellent. John, I have a few questions from my followers. We can cover them. Try to answer them in 1 minute frame.
Yep.
Let's start with the first question is about dynamics involving uranium mine restarts. Are they more difficult now than they are in the past?
Restarts have always been a problem which people underestimate. And I use an example. If you had an old motor car sitting in your garage doing nothing, and then you get a mechanic out there and he does an audit and you say, oh, look, I need to fix this and I need to fix that. And if that motor car then had to race in a Le Mans like at flat out, you'll start exposing the weaknesses of that car because of the stress. So now you come to a mothballed operation. You must analyze how that mothballed operation was looked after while it was in non-production. Many of them are left on their own. And then the people come in and do an audit. They don't go through and say, oh, yeah, here we go. And then from that audit, they'll get a refurbishing contractor who will then fix this tank, this, that, and they'll spend a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
And then on start date, mines only operate one way, either flat out or nothing at all. There's no idling speed. In that idling, in that process, yes, there's a bit of a commissioning time. What will happen with a refurbished mine is that you're going to have exposed problems will come up which weren't identified. Oh, these pumps didn't go. The electronics were not reading correctly. So in a way, to commission a refurbished operation is more difficult than to commission a brand new operation where it's all the same, everything's sorted out.
Yeah, it makes
now, it doesn't
sense.
mean these operations won't start, but what does mean that what you thought was 6 months to get to a target, it might take you 12. And those issues are cost factors that maybe should be more implicated than what they are to say, you know, I've got this asset, I'll get it done and off I go. Never mind getting new operators, new this, new that. So although it's an important part, I think it has its good features, but also it has its let's look out for issues. Look, that was more than a minute. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No problem. The next one is, can you explain 8 million credits that DYLLF will get back from Australia government for exploration? Just if you can explain more details about these funds.
Yeah. So basically, what that package that was referred to in the quarterly report is that. And Vimy has been receiver of those sort of, it's a research and development to do with new types of ways of thinking of mining and processing. We have also got a lot of expenditure that is reimbursable from our operations in Africa, and those can be quantified, and those refunds will happen from expenditures that occurred in 22 and 23. So they're the and we've got there's a history of that. The people that do that work understand it, so it's not it's a real return that we'll be getting.
Okay. Next question. Would you consider M&A with other players in Alligator River so you can build up several deposits with a centralized mill? In one way, that's an attractive proposition. I think that area, as I mentioned, needs to be looked at much more holistically, and not just trying to find another Narbalek, you know what I mean, at 20 million pounds at a couple of percent. That's not going to make a mining operation. And luckily, DYLLF has got a big ground holding. The conversation should always be there, whether the realities of expectation can be met by each company and the expectation of their shareholders
is unsure, and but you know it can those I think they should be part of the thinking going ahead without detracting from the assets that we have there already.
Got it. Next question. Have you been approached or have you considered any takeover bids on Tumas coming from the Chinese or the Western companies?
Look, you might say that some people, some of the countries that are looking forward and looking, you know, their requirements over the long term, as we have been sort of also developing our company with sort of 20 to 30-year life of mine, which goes out to 2050, and with upside beyond that. I think that no, not really. There have been some interesting discussions which, for me, underpin the depth of the commitment to demand and the new reactor builds that have to happen, and that supply has to be planned from now. Those things in conversation are coming out, and probably not many people are getting that exposure through people that I'm you know I know and we can discuss, and anybody should be able to work it out that, you know, if you're going to build you know, you got the Chinese aspiration, which is huge. You got the American aspiration, but each one of the other ones, UK, the Eastern European bloc, the French, the way that the Swedes are changing, it's all involves new builds. It all involves new demand, and that demand is actually brought forward because the builders of reactors have to supply a full fuel tank with the build.
Yeah.
And of course, that product is required 8 years before the delivery of that unit, because nobody's gonna sign a contract and be held ransom like Westinghouse was in the 1970s. And so that's where I mentioned that the dynamic of supply and demand will now stretch from the traditional producer utility to the producer builder, which is another huge impact that is yet to be felt in the industry, my belief.
Okay. Another question. On the DYLLF website, it says there is a capacity to produce 10 million plus uranium per annum, and Tumas and Mulga together add about 7 million. Where do you see other 3 million pounds coming from? Alligator River or M&A? Where is it coming from?
I see it. I've said I've never discounted looking at opportunities in terms of from our new platform of where we stand as a uranium company. I still see opportunity for win-win consolidation. I see upside in our projects, both Tumas and Mulga Rock, plus in later years through Alligator. So in some you'll see, I even say 10 to 16 million pounds, and they're the sort of aspirations we've got over the next sort of 5 years. Over.
Yeah. Next question. Who are the people that you respect the most in uranium mining sector?
Well, I think everybody, it's like a team, you know, one team is good at this and the other team is good at that. I do like Encore in terms of the type of the patch which they're working, and you've got to look at it in that context. I do like what NextGen have done and how they have got themselves to where they are. What things happen in the future is another point. Of course, the Cameco's and the Kazatomproms for what they are, and they're probably the only pure play uranium deliverers out there. but they operate opportunity from a much more institutionalized framework, and there's a lot of room for others. I do believe there's a general lack of expertise, and probably of everybody you spoke about. Nobody has built a uranium mine. Maybe some ISR, you know, with the Encore guys, you know what I mean, with what they have done, and so yeah, I think the assets that already exist, the Paladins and the Bosses, and people have to evaluate, and the Kayelekera, which are the two Paladin projects. They need, you know, you need to look at those with a proper analysis, and they have their pluses. But I think the Berkeley thing shows for itself what it is, you know, on huge promise, probably not deliverable, even on the good days, because of the politics and the nature of the ore body. But everybody discounts that. It's a project. It's a sector that needs rebuilding, and essentially moving from an exploration mentality and discovery mentality to an execution and delivery mentality are two different worlds. And there are, you know, like in any jungle, there's the bottom feeders, there's the mid feeders, there's the predators, and all of those. And I think you can liken any corporate sector in that context.
Yeah, good answer. Two more, John. You already answered the part of next question, but I will ask it nevertheless. Is Namibia a high-risk jurisdiction to do business in, and what assurances, if any, have you had from Namibian government that they won't be seeking a bigger equity stake in your company's Namibian deposits than they already have?
I believe that question for existing licenses and companies is off the table, and I think that the whole of the economy, it's so reliant on the mining industry, and as I say, it's not just uranium; it's a whole. It's gold and base metals and critical metals and diamonds, etc. So I see that in fact what happened a month ago is actually in a way a good thing, because it was sort of tested with not much thinking and quickly retracted, and it makes it difficult for that to happen. They open the door a little bit to say, look, in future we'll leave that open, but I think that's a dignified way of getting out of the corner, because I think what Namibia needs more, and I think it's recognized, it needs more mining operations, it needs more of that sort, and that will create the wealth that will feed back into the country, and that shouldn't be damaged.
Okay, the final one. Deep Yellow's latest quarterly activities report shows that the company has made some very large new greenfield tenement applications in Northern Territory, which are located far away from your existing Angulari deposit. Given that Deep Yellow is an advanced stage developer with its hands full working to bring two deposits into production over the next few years, what is it about these new greenfield tenements you want to acquire that has caught your interest? And have you explored any of this ground before you previously worked for Uraners?
We have not acquired any properties apart from what we got from Vimy. So it's a misunderstanding that somebody thinks we've grown our tenement base post the merger. These are all inherited from the Vimy transaction with Cameco. So no, and they are, some of them are not granted, and those that aren't granted, that's how we'll manage the big land holding, and they're held under veto, some of them from the Aboriginal communities, and that, you know, we can go ahead, but we haven't undertaken more under the since the merger. And the person asking the question is right to say, what are you doing? Well, we're not doing what he thinks. It's just a misunderstanding.
Okay. John, I really appreciate for you taking the time to come in my show. I wish you luck with your company and, of course, in your private life. And really, thanks a lot for coming to my show.
Thank you for taking the interest, Lucian, and I enjoyed talking to you. And let's see how this goes. Over.
Yeah, thank you very much.